to the Colo Echo and American Association for Cancer Research fundraising live stream. We hope to kind of just have an open conversation between researchers and the charity side of things in the cancer space, and we hope that you enjoy the stream. Yeah. So just an introduction on my behalf. I'm Nicole. I'm a second-year pharmacology student at King's.
And I'm Asma. I'm a third-year neuroscience student at King's College London.
So we're both members of the 2023 King's iGEM team, and our project Colo Echo aims to utilize synthetic biology and ultrasound technology to develop a non-invasive screening method for colorectal cancer using engineered bacterial gas vesicles. And today we want to discuss the current advances in cancer research and how charities like the AACR educate the public about cancer research and raise awareness about the fight against cancer.
Yeah, throughout our stream, we will be accepting donations through our GoFundMe, which are obviously for charity purposes. Please help our cause by trying to kind of make a note on what cancer, like the big cancer issue, and you can do that by either clicking on the link on the description or by scanning our QR code. And thank you so much for our speakers for joining us today. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves and maybe share your first memory of the word cancer in general. We don't want it to be either like super research specific, but just like genuinely the first thing you remember when you first heard cancer. Maybe Mark Green, if you wanna start us off.
So my name is Mark Green. I'm a professor of bio-nanotechnology at King's College London. The first memory of the word cancer, I think it's pretty much like a lot of people, certainly people in my age. It's when an elderly relative was diagnosed with cancer. I mean, that's what I probably heard the word beforehand, but it probably never struck home how serious it was. But certainly when my grandfather got cancer in his 70s, I would have been a teenage boy. And back in the 1980s, cancer was more of a death sentence than it is now. So I can remember feeling quite helpless about it. And I think the entire family was, you know, unfortunately, your grandfather's got cancer, and that's it. And there was no idea of treatment, there was no idea of diagnosis beyond that. It was just a case of, unfortunately, this is where we are. So that was my first brush with the word cancer.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Mike, would you want to share yours?
Sure. Hi, my name is Mike Gilbert. I'm the Associate Director for Peer-to-Peer Programs at the American Association for Cancer Research. It's funny, as Mark was talking, I was trying to think back of my first memories of brushing with cancer, and I had to say that I was lucky enough not to have any elderly relatives that died of cancer, all died of other causes, heart disease and other things. But the first time I started taking cancer seriously is when I started working for this organization 20 years ago. And it became a calling for me to do something that I was proud of, that I could share with everyone around me and feel good about at night when I put my head on the pillow. And it wasn't until later in life, and I had actually been working at the AACR for quite a while, that both my father and my aunt were diagnosed with cancer, and those are honestly the first people really in my life that were diagnosed. And luckily, they were both able to get amazing treatment and are doing well today. So for the most part, I've been lucky in my interaction with cancer, and lucky in the sense also that I've been able to work for an amazing organization that is doing so much work in funding the kind of research that you all are doing.
Thank you for sharing that with us as well. We're going to also share our perspectives as well. So for me, I think it was a little bit of both of your stories. So originally, for me, it was more the research aspect. So I was always like thinking about studying cancer, going into therapeutics, things like that. But then my grandmother got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer really late. She unfortunately passed away, but I think that was the first time that it really hit home for me. And I also ended up doing charity work for the AACR after that. So I think I just kind of got close to it through that experience for sure.
I've been extremely lucky to never have experienced it very closely, but I would say my first introduction to cancer was a bit abnormal. Per se, I'm 20. I don't know why I'm using the word abnormal, but it was through YouTube, like YouTube videos and trying to kind of the weird animations of seeing the cells multiply until there's no stop and metastasis and all the that fun stuff from a scientific point of view were like very interesting. But like as I grow up, I learn as to how many people get affected and how many people it touches. And you kind of have to sit down and you realize how close it is. It doesn't target specific people based on genetics. A lot of times it's just happens and it's just awful. But there is some hope at the end of the tunnel. And if Mark Green, you could kind of give us a bit of an overview of the amazing work you've been in the bigger projects you're part of and you're an indispensable part of when it comes to cancer therapeutics and diagnostics.
Sure. So my background, I'm a materials chemist in a physics department looking at biological problems. So I do really interdisciplinary research, and that's a key part of what we do at King's. Originally, I did my doctorate in making nanoparticles, a type of nanoparticle called quantum dots, in the mid-90s for optoelectronic applications. They were designed to go into optical fibers as dopants. But during my PhD, there was a group at Berkeley and Georgia Tech who used the particles that I made into imaging very simple biological processes. And that struck me as an amazing cross-disciplinary type of work. You're taking optoelectronics, solid state material science, and using it in biology. Now, I didn't even know that you could image anything using light-emitting materials. And this is, and you know, it really caught my eye. And the big thing at first was, this will never work. I don't think it'll ever hit the clinic because the materials they were using were containing cadmium and contained heavy metals. And I thought, you're trying to detect one disease state using a material that may be just as bad. So over the next few years, we were looking at how we could do this, how we could use light emission in biology from material science. And the big thing that we're looking at right now is conjugated polymer nanoparticles. Now, conjugated polymers are plastics. They were invented in Cambridge in the 1990s, but the key thing about them is they give light out when you excite them, whether you either shine them UV light on them or pass an electrical current through them, they glow. And the big application for this is in OLED TVs and OLED displays. They're the O in OLED, organic. So the big thing, we saw this new material, we saw that it was brilliant, it was really bright, very stable, and we thought, can we take these materials and then use them to image diseases? And it took a little bit of, well, it took quite a lot of research, a lot of dead ends, a lot of false starts, to get to the point where we could take these polymers, wrap them up into nanoparticles, coat them with a molecule or a series of molecules that would make them biologically active and compatible with existing technologies. And then we can start, we've started now talking to clinicians, biologists, pharmacists, biologists, basically anybody who will work with us to image disease states. And colorectal cancer is probably the biggest one we go for right now. So that's what we do, light emitting particles based on display technologies to image cancer.
Yeah, that is extremely interesting. really fascinating. But what do you think are the advantages of using nanoparticles compared to maybe like current diagnostic methods?
So let's have a look at the current diagnostic methods. So you've got MRI, there's radio imaging as well, and these techniques have positive and negative sides. But I'm really interested in light emission, the use of light to detect disease states. Now, this has been going on for years. This is nothing new. But typically, researchers use small organic molecules. They're often referred to as light-emitting dyes. But the problem with these materials is they're often very unstable. Sometimes you have minutes, seconds, or hours to use them, and then they fade away. And also, the colors you get aren't great. So you've got the entire visible range. But you don't always want the visible range. Sometimes you want beyond the visible range. You want something like infrared. And I see if I can just do a quick display here. So if you can just see my hand there, can you see that? What color is that? Can you see the red? Yeah, you see? Yep. So what that's telling us is skin absorbs blue light, and the red light that was going through my skin was because skin is transparent and blood's transparent at these wavelengths. Now, not a lot of common dyes are luminescent towards the red end of the spectrum or the infrared region. So a lot of the particles we have, because they're based on OLEDs, they're incredibly stable. We've made materials that last for years. Literally, you make them, you can put them on a bench in a lab, and you can leave them for 2 years. And then you can use them to image cancer. They're that stable. And also, we can design these particles to emit at the red end of the spectrum. So they will glow in regions that are useful to biologists. So we can do potentially deep tissue imaging. We can go further into the body. And this is a big advantage for clinicians. So a wider range of colors, more stable materials. And I think that's really the best thing about the nanoparticles we use.
Again, extremely interesting, fascinating. Earlier you mentioned that your target is colorectal cancer. Is there any particular reason why you guys chose colorectal cancer as your target?
Well, if I've got to be honest here, it wasn't our first choice. So one of the big problems you have as a scientist in a specific discipline is if you want to work in another discipline, it's finding collaborators who are willing to work with you. And certainly in my earlier career, when I was making nanoparticles that were luminescent, we really struggled to get any biologists or any clinicians on board to use our materials. And originally we were looking at breast cancer because the surface chemistry of breast cancer tumors was, I would say, better understood at that point. So we could design our nanoparticles with very specific molecules on the surface that would attach to the tumors, and that was the obvious way to go. It wasn't until I was at a conference in Leeds in the UK, and it was specifically a cancer conference, and it was one of the most frightening conferences I've ever been to, because the images they showed and the things they talked about was horrific. You know, it really hammers home what a horrible disease cancer is. But it also showed I was in a completely different discipline. So all these clinicians and medics were talking about the disease, and then I turned up and I'm talking about nanoparticles. And I was completely at the wrong place, really. So I didn't get much interest apart from one clinician who came up to me at the end and said, "What you have is exactly what I need for my research." And it takes a very specific kind of collaborator who is willing to go out his or her way to cross disciplines and take a risk on a technology that is completely alien to them. And this clinician, a guy called David Jane at the University of Leeds, is a colorectal cancer specialist. And he had been working with nanoparticles, but like a lot of biologists, he didn't have access to the latest cutting-edge materials. So he was using whatever was around, probably not the best materials. So when I turned up at a conference saying, hey, look what I've got, and I'm willing just to give them away, he said, yeah, give us the material you have. And we started a very fruitful collaboration where we've developed these new materials. We've taken on students together and we've worked closely over the last few years. So my interest in colorectal cancer is by finding the correct collaborator. You've got to find the right people who will see the relevance of your research, and it's going well.
Yeah, we did meet Dr. Jane, and we understand what you mean when you say like it takes a mind that can put the lines together to kind of join forces to create a solution to a problem that's been there for so long. And you bring a very fascinating word to the table, which is collaboration. And collaboration between researchers can be hard, especially if you don't speak the same language, scientific language. When it comes to speaking to clinicians, it must be an added like difficulty, isn't it? How is it? How do you think it's easy to communicate? How can you find an easy way to communicate nanoparticles to medical professionals? And are there any challenges or safety concerns that you have to bring up to them that they are pretty apprehensive about?
Yeah, I mean, over the last 20 years, it's got easier as the barrier between boundaries has gradually come down. And we have, excuse me, at King's, we have doctoral training centres specifically for imaging sciences and physicists and chemists and material scientists. So the barriers are coming down. A lot of the time, you're going to a clinician who is a busy man or woman with very specific goals, very specific targets, and you're asking them to stop what they're doing and try something new. And I understand the reluctance sometimes, to change. If it's not broken, don't fix it. I think a lot of the time is their mentality. So it does take an unusual scientist like David Jane to come along and say, yeah, what we're doing right now isn't good enough. We want to get that even better. But I think as funding opportunities come along, material scientists, physical scientists work more hand in hand with clinicians and biologists, and it's becoming more common now. But the safety aspect is a key thing here. So because these are brand new materials, everything has to be tested from the ground up. And there's obviously a lot of worry about nanomaterials and anything nano having some kind of inherent evil toxicology or danger to the environment. Now, this isn't necessarily the case, but with any new medicine or any new imaging technology or medical device, everything has to be tested. So part of our academic research program is testing the toxicology. We do a wide range of assays on any of the materials we develop, and we test them to the nth degree. Now, there is a problem in so much as there is not a set of protocols for nanomaterials to adopt to test the toxicological issues. So there's no set of standards we can pick up and address. So we're pretty much left to our own devices. But with any new material, any new assay, any new imaging, we routinely make sure cells don't die, animals don't die. We don't do a lot of animal work as of yet, but we certainly do a lot of cell work, fixed cells, and like a lot of imaging scientists, we grow cells. So we do a lot of the toxicity assays, and before this can actually get to clinic, a lot of hurdles have to be overcome. There's a lot going on behind the scenes.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for your overview. It's fantastic and really interesting to hear about.
Yes, thank you so much. So now Mike, with the AACR, what you guys do, I know when working with you, I was often told about like how you guys are able to educate the public about research, like what Professor Green is doing, and even in a smaller sense, what we're doing. What have you found is like the most effective way to relay research information to the general public?
So I think the best way we do it, we have two reports that we put out. Well, one's every other year, but every year we put out something called the Cancer Progress Report, and it takes stock of what's going on in the community, what advances have happened in the past year, and we get that out to Capitol Hill here in the States, the Congress, and out to the general public. And it provides a lot of statistical information that is presented in a fashion that's easy for folks to understand. It allows us on the staff to go out and talk to people out in public that are doing public events, and we educate our advocates that way. I think it's a fantastic piece that we put out that allows us to communicate everything. A lot of very dense scientific information of the type that Mark was talking about in a very lay-friendly manner that allows people to get actually excited about cancer research and excited about the things that are coming along the path in the past year. Additionally, we put out another report called that's focused on cancer disparities, which minorities, folks that are economically disadvantaged, folks in rural areas have worse cancer outcomes because of the way society is structured, and we try to shine a light on those things too, to get people in those communities more help through our advocacy in government and through our fundraising, to kind of get to make sure that the population at large knows these things so that we can address them.
What would you say is the biggest challenge when you're doing things like that? Is it difficult to target a certain demographic, or what challenges do you face with that?
So for us, I mean, the cancer space here in the United States is fairly crowded, and at the AACR, we're more of a scientific organization, less of a public organization. There are organizations like the American Cancer Society, and in the celebrity zone, Stand Up to Cancer, which is an organization that we work with, that are a lot more public facing than we are. So I think that's the biggest problem in getting the particular message out to public. But when we are able to engage with folks directly through programs like the ones I run with our Runners for Research program, and we run a gaming program as well for young people to get involved in, and we do a lot of educating of patient advocates. I think those are the types of things that allow us to kind of push the message through to the public. Although it's on a smaller and less public scale, I think the interactions we're having are very high quality, and the more we expand them, obviously, the better we do. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. We're a small yet nimble fish in a big pond.
When it comes to, I know you mentioned like expansion and things like that. When it comes to like a global reach, would you say that you still have like connection with like the global space as a whole? Like we're in the
Oh,
UK,
absolutely.
so
Right, right. So yes, absolutely. AACR does conferences all around the world. I know we do a lot of stuff in Italy and Switzerland right now. I only say that because I know our CEO has been over there quite a bit in the last couple of months. But we work with researchers in Europe, Africa, Japan, Korea, all around the world to kind of to bring them together, to fund their research, to get them involved in the things that we're doing here. And that's just on the scientific level. On a public level, I mentioned our gaming program, Players versus Cancer. We get streamers around the world playing games and raising money for us. From we've had creators come to us from every continent except Antarctica. it's been really cool. You know, we've gotten folks in Africa, we've gotten folks in Korea again, Brazil, Romania, all sorts of places that I would have never imagined us being able to reach. And it's it's a new audience for us. It allows us to get to demographics of the type that we haven't been able to get to before, and maybe spaces that we never would have thought necessarily that they would be interested in, but we've been able to do stuff like that. Additionally, with our marathoning program, like I'm talking to a guy right now who's going to run the Berlin Marathon on our behalf, which is super cool for us. That's something new and exciting. So yeah, we've been able to get our message out around the world, not in a huge scale, but in a smaller scale, and I would say a very effective scale.
Now, if someone who is watching this at home from any part of the world, how could you suggest that they get involved, either in raising awareness, fundraising, education? What's a good way for them to get involved?
So we can anyone, anywhere can do anything to raise money for AACR. I mentioned some of the specific programs, but we have people doing all kinds of stuff. There's a big run on, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with pickleball, which is sort of a new form of tennis that's taking off here in the States. But it's becoming a very new and a hot way for us to raise money. The folks in the pickleball demographic are certainly philanthropy minded, that type of thing, the gaming program as well. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of get the message out in any way that we can. We use a lot of social media to do that, but we tell folks, anything you want to do, bake sale, pickleball, running a marathon in Qatar, or wherever you want to do it, you can certainly raise money for AACR, and we tend to make it fairly easy for you to do. We've got the platforms that allow you to do that. And we try to encourage a lot of live streaming as well, like this. It's an incredible tool to reach audiences that you may not have thought you could reach before if you actually play it right. We do a lot of work on Twitch, YouTube, things of that nature, to try to get the word out as much as possible to as wide an audience as we can.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah. This was absolutely fantastic. We really felt like we were creating some sort of platform where scientists and charities and the public could come together and have a conversation, and then more about the new things out there that could really, really change how we see and maybe even think about when it comes to cancer.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you both so much for speaking with us, and thank you for everyone who's watching this at home. Please, again, feel free to donate through the QR code or the link we have. All your donations will make a significant difference in the fight against cancer. And thank you all for being a part of this discussion. Thank you.
You're welcome.